Do you ever get the urge to start a project and then about 5 hours later realize you've just jumped headfirst into an unending hell of your own making? Hi, I'm the worst person on this website, and until they stop paying me, I'm going to keep spouting bullshit. I did not want this video to be any longer than 15 minutes, but unfortunately I have issues. Welcome to an incredibly unnecessary, brutally detailed look into the psyche of Stardew Valley's most infamous and only mayor, Lewis. This video, first and foremost, was inspired by Fiona Sangster's Stardew deep dives. I think her and I are on the same wavelength of deeply insane, and I hope she knows what she's caused me to do. Please check out her videos, they are incredible, and I'm creating a religion dedicated to her. I hope that's okay. If not, we can start with like a simple moral code and move on from there. Anyways, if you're watching this video, I'd say it's safe to assume you've played the game Stardew Valley. The farming sim, which just released its 1.6 update, has been a staple of the gaming community ever since its explosive launch in 2016. You play as a young, burnt-out Joja employee that has grown sick of their corporate life, thus deciding to join Tradwife TikTok and start over at their deceased grandfather's farm. After a soothing bus drive to your new home, Pelican Town, you are greeted with a forgotten plot of land, and two characters ready to welcome you into the valley. You set foot on the lush, green grass for the first time, and your world forever changes. Robin, the town's very hot carpenter, is the first person to await your arrival. With her calm, carefree attitude and fun personality, she is objectively the best person you could possibly meet as an introduction to the game. She cracks a few jokes, leads you to your cabin, and primes you with a bit of neighborly charm as a preface to the other person on your land, the famed Mayor Lewis. Now, if you weren't a little bitch and you watched the opening cutscene all the way through, you'll probably have remembered Lewis's name from the letter your grandfather left you. Along with the details of the farm, it reads, P.S. If Lewis is still alive, say hi to the old guy for me, will ya? And no, Grandpa, I won't. You are faced with an old, gray man wearing stupid suspenders and a dumb hat. That is not an attack on old people with a cute little style. Okay, I love you guys, you're so adorable. However, that is an attack on Lewis because he reminds me of Quentin Tarantino, and that is an insult. I will not be elaborating. He looks like he's about to make Uma Thurman very uncomfortable. His personality instantly clashes with Robin's, a stuck-up, pompous attitude sticking out in his first lines of dialogue. His initial meeting scene is, well, annoying, but he quickly gets out of your hair, providing you with 15 parsnip seeds free of charge and the ever-important shipping box. He takes on the role of any other life sim town mayor, a background, weaselly character that has no bearing on you whatsoever. He fixes his car, walks around town, and allows you to get divorced. Really, his position, barring the beginning cutscene, is pretty minimal, but as I'm sure you know, the Stardew Valley community does not see it that way, including me. You've probably seen the train of guttural, innate hatred that Stardew players have for Lewis. Almost every Let's Player you'll find is his mortal enemy. There's an entire subreddit dedicated to Lewis disdain. He has an entire questline designed to embarrass him. He is the game's punching bag, and as a certified hater, I love to watch him suffer. If the human race designed a device specifically made to keep people alive but cause them the most extreme psychological distress possible, I would hook the man up to it instantly and watch it like a soap opera for hours on end. In fact, I think that site would replace my antidepressants. I can't confirm that, but I think it would be worth a trial. However, that seemingly endless vitriol towards Lewis doesn't quite match up with the background character story I told earlier. If anything, Joja employee Morris should be the most hated character in the game. He's smug, money-hungry, and immoral. He wants to destroy historic Pelican Town sites, put the local shops out of business, and drain the ecosystem dry. Why wouldn't he be the series' biggest villain? Well, that's why we're here. If you already find me irritating, leave now, it's going to get worse. Let's first break down the full, unabridged story of Lewis's behavior in life and his mayoral duties. The world of Lewis seems to be a very undiscovered one. He has no known family or children, and very little is known about his pre-mayor days. That is probably for good reason, considering he has been the prideful mayor of Pelican Town for 20 years, running unopposed every term. Why nobody has ever challenged him is unknown to us at the moment, but I doubt a rigged election could occur within such a small town. With word of mouth and yappy neighbors, the jig would be up quickly, so it seems he won the position by merit and not through dubious means. But the player is also not given the chance to run against him. If this is any indication of the rights of the rest of the town, it might be a rigorous or even secretive process to run for mayor. Of course, this is just a game mechanic, but I have to read into everything. I'm getting ahead of myself though, we shouldn't be here yet. In terms of general personality, Lewis is fairly milquetoast, civil, and old-fashioned. He's never outwardly rude or hostile, but he doesn't engage personally with you in any meaningful way. In contrast, the other Pelican Town residents usually take a bold stance when meeting you, either rude or friendly. That rule has exceptions, of course, but normally. His behavior reads very similar to that of a real politician, with an attempt to be courteous but not distinguished. He mentions his relationship with your grandfather every once in a while, but can never truly spit out anything kind about him. He'll discuss a few memories, like the old man hating his rickety farmhouse bed, which, it looked like this, so fucking ping pong table. But other than that, there's pretty much nothing else. Maybe they were in a homoerotic relationship, maybe they're divorced. We'll never know. Either way, Lewis also refuses to delve into any stories about his early mayorhood or drop any nuggets about Pelican Town's history. He says he takes great pride in the job, but can't give any context about what he's done to improve the town. I think that fact in and of itself can create a disconnect between Lewis and his air of authority. If he's the real macho mayor of the town and he can't relate himself to it, what power does he hold anyway? He tends to be fairly self-important about his position too, which further worsens the gap. One of his dialogue pieces reads, "Everyone seems a little happier on the weekends, don't you think? I'm on the job 7 days a week though." Me too, bitch. Have you seen my farm? You know that squash you're eating? I grew it. I fostered that yam from the fucking ground, and your hands are completely untouched, uncalloused, and you're enjoying the hell out of it. That sentence also implies that he's doing something of note and not standing next to his car. He places himself on a pedestal in almost every conversation, but when we compare his daily activities to other town residents, he seems to do less than even the retired Evelyn and George. And they have excuses, Lewis does not, and he's getting paid. His discussion of the other townsfolk, barring Marnie, is fairly limited. He'll bring up Gus and his famous cooking from time to time, but he seems to have no tangible relationships with anyone except for, again, Marnie and the governor. And the relationship with the governor relies on garnering approval, which he desperately yearns for, but never does anything to get. He also mentions Pierre, but Pierre's his little cash cow, so whatever. He's almost completely disconnected from the social sphere of the valley, yet tries to insert himself into everything. His focus remains specifically on himself and the look of Pelican Town to outsiders rather than the actual internal workings of his interactions. His relationship with Marnie, the town's kind and gentle rancher, is often referenced as the worst piece of his personality puzzle. Marnie is an integral part of the game. She sells feed, animals, and ranching supplies to the player when she's in her damn store and tends to be out on the town quite a bit. She leads with a pleasant demeanor and has an explicit care for the animals she raises, offering tips and advice in her dialogue. Overall, she's very personable and sweet. Lewis, though, somehow pulled her. Once you get to know him, he will send you on a quest to collect his lucky purple shorts. Even outside of the Stardew community, most people know about this Easter egg. It's nothing new. You have to acquire 2 hearts with Marnie and enter her bedroom to find the shorts on the floor, building up a secret romance scandal. It's fun, it's silly, and it's a good chance to humiliate Lewis. Which maybe he's into that, I don't know. However, the two's whirlwind sexcapades do not end at a little shorts action. We delve in deeper. This feels like I'm talking about the sex life of Ronald Reagan. It kind of makes me want to die, but whatever. If you're at 6 hearts with both neighbors, you'll receive Lewis's 6-heart cutscene. In said scene, Lewis and Marnie are speaking to one another about their secret relationship, confirming it once and for all while the farmer looms in the background. This interaction feels like watching 2 people on a singles cruise link up in the room next to you. Like, it isn't unexpected, but you still don't need to hear it. They're discussing the idea of making their relationship public. Lewis believes that this will, quote, undermine his authority, while Marnie thinks he should chill the fuck out and stop being a loser. Marnie ends up complying with his wishes and says she'll keep the relationship a secret before you pop out of the shadows. Lewis will ask if you heard anything, and you can either promise to keep the secret or tell him you'll spill it to the whole town. If you pick the first option, Lewis will thank you. The inverse sees him start crying. Listen, I am all for healthy expressions of emotion, but figure it out, man, my god. Not only is this cutscene very juicy, but it uncovers that grand view Lewis has of himself once again. Many people will say he's being ludicrous about the fact that the town would be angry at him for fucking, but I actually agree. Do not tell me that shit. I don't want to know. However, the main point of mentioning this cutscene is to show off his fragile attitude. This situation is often touted as one of his worst crimes. He isn't a good boyfriend in any capacity, but in general, I do think that Lewis and Marnie just aren't very compatible. He does seem ashamed of Marnie, which always comes across very shittily. The two are just on very different sides of the social coin, and I can't really see a future for them. His relationship with Marnie is simply another drop in a bucket of ungodly sins. A bad personality is one thing, but we've mostly been viewing it from the perspective of social interactions, not as a citizen he is supposed to take care of. So let's shift the lens. Being the mayor of Pelican Town is initially presented as a hefty task with several dilapidated areas, a malfunctioning ecosystem, and a very short supply of new residents. However, once we unearth the fact that he has been mayor for 20 damn years, all of that comes to a standstill. If the town has been under his control for so long, why did he let it fall into ruin? The first excuse I can come up with is Joja Mart's attempt at a takeover. If they plan to demolish the community center, why would anyone put in the effort of caring for it? Why would it make any sense to divert tax money to upkeep if it wasn't going to last? This could make sense in some very specific scenarios, but it relies on one very glaring issue. Lewis is the person who makes the decisions, meaning he would have to choose to sell the community center. It would be entirely up to him, and that still wouldn't explain why the center fell into ruin in the first place. But continuing on this route, maybe it was the siphoning of funds from Pierre to Joja. The economic health of Pelican Town suffered, and it became less of a priority to care for recreational spots. But, again, Lewis makes the decisions here. He had to allow Joja into the town to begin with. Perhaps it was a simple mistake, giving Joja the right to build a store in the valley. Maybe he thought it would expand economic growth, and it did, but that money was not put back into the small businesses that made the valley what it is. The town would either become a corporate hellscape and lose all the charm it originally had, or people would move away to Zuzu City. This idea doesn't take the happiness of the residents into account at all, which is frankly a very common position for a politician to fill, but you know. Also, in these situations, it doesn't explain things like the beach bridge falling into disrepair or the hidden forest being blocked off. If Lewis was really that money hungry above all else, he would be selling the wood in the forest and setting up a fish farm on the beaches. It seems to be more of an unwillingness to work on his part. It doesn't benefit him to engage with the town. He gets paid either way, and he doesn't have to prove himself to his community. He isn't angry when someone, i.e. the player, comes in to fix the messes he has left behind, but he won't act either. He isn't aiming to harm, but his negligence does it for him. And with 20 years on the job, we can't attribute this to a lack of experience either. He knows what the town needs, going so far as to point out how wretched the community center looks to the player. He's aware, and although it may not seem like the most evil choice, doing nothing is still a choice. There's also the war that Kent was away fighting in, which I think is the most plausible explanation. Maybe resources were diverted towards the troops, but Robin's store with said resources is still functioning fine, and supply doesn't seem to be rationed, so that one's up to your interpretation. There is also a theory that Lewis is misusing tax money. Or, I guess, calling it a theory isn't quite accurate considering he blatantly does misuse tax money. A common example is the massive gold Lewis statue found behind his house. I think that tidbit, disregarding the vanity value it has, could even be completely disregarded in the argument of tax money misuse. Because, and I'm sure you've already thought this, if the money doesn't go to improving the town, it has to go somewhere, and there sure as hell aren't many examples of it being used properly. The festivals tend to require heavy contributions from the townsfolk to operate, which negates a lot of the possible expenses those could bring up. The wooden pieces used for decoration are most likely provided by Robin, so that would be in-house labor, which I'm sure is discounted. Even if the pieces were full price, they would probably only be a one-time purchase. In the same league as my other point, if he did desperately want the town to grow, he would need to up tourism, which starts at repairing the bus, and he refuses to do that. So, Lewis is a self-righteous, indifferent asshole who doesn't give even half a shit about his career. That's not great, and it becomes a lot easier to see why he is so deeply hated. However, it doesn't quite explain why he's more hated than Joja Mart's Morris, who wants to destroy the very feel of Pelican Town and replace it with a corporate, lifeless finish. What makes Lewis easier to hate? Well, there's a few things we have to get out of the way first that are fairly obvious. Lewis is a character you interact with more, so the player has more of a chance to get to know him and build a distaste for his behavior. He's also around past the demolition of Joja, so his time far outlives Morris, unfortunately. Morris is simply a plot device, and though he's snarky, rude, and unjust, he's never the forefront. Lewis, however, is constantly waiting to bore you to death with his overwhelmingly beige presence. Moving past that, though, let's actually compare the two. We already established that Lewis is more careless than actively evil, but that entire statement hinges on how we define the concept of evil. The idea of evil itself is a malleable one, even though it may seem pretty straightforward. A lot of the definitions of evil can be attributed to a certain religion, and since we don't know much about Joja, Stardew Valley's god, it's hard to work off a model of ethical behavior like that. The religious stances on evil also vary, so it isn't a good place to begin. If you're wondering what my credentials are, I like to read Wikipedia. That's it. In a very broad sense, being evil is attributed to the facilitation of unnecessary, intentional harm, but it can also be seen as the absence of good. Lewis does not seem to intentionally choose to directly harm people, which would remove him from that first direction if we see refusal to act as an unintentional form of harm, which in this case can be tricky. Intention also doesn't remove harm, so that's debatable. If Lewis knows that not acting could affect the community's happiness, is it indifference or an evil act? And at this point, he has to know he got into that position, he knows what his duties are. On the other side of the coin, if we see evil as an absence of good, he's not doing that much good. He's choosing to be careless, not necessarily evil, but he is impacting people, so opinions on that vary wildly. This is why they have classes on this and not some guy talking into a microphone. Anyway, let's apply those same ideas to Morris. Morris chooses to work at Joja, a company affecting the happiness, economic development, and ecosystem of Pelican Town, and most likely many other areas as well. He also famously tries to pull Pierre's customers away from the shop, which is an active participation in worsening the business of his competitor. This would all align with the thought of purposely doing harm, except for the fact that most of the harm is done indirectly. It's still done, but Morris is just an employee doing his job. You probably wouldn't consider an Amazon employee evil for working there, right? The only thing that sets him apart here is that he seems to revel in it, or at least attempt to influence the town in a more negative direction. He knows what he's doing, in theory, which lands him in the same boat as Lewis, except Morris is an employee and Lewis is the mayor. Lewis's inaction is used in place of authority, while Morris is just a step on a corporate ladder. But does that make them any different? Well, the truth of the matter is it doesn't really apply. I love comparing details like this that have no actual bearing on the matter at hand because it's fun and a good enrichment activity for me. That's pretty much it. It's cool to look into it, but it doesn't really matter. I'm pretty sure most people dislike Lewis from Stardew Valley more because he's annoying and easy to make fun of and a politician. He's a bad mayor, his mustache looks awful, and he's fun to punch at. The morality of a video game character doesn't really enter your mind when you're alone with your Switch and he's charging you 50,000 gold for a divorce. Everybody needs, deep in their heart, to be a hater sometimes. It's human nature. I was born a hater, and I will be a hater until I die. And Lewis is a great target for that. He is just the first person you see that you can be like, hey, I hate that guy. Love doesn't usually unite a player base. In fact, it often rips it apart. Being a horrible little hater, however, will always win. So my hypothesis is that it's entertaining to hate Lewis, and Morris just doesn't have as much annoying boy swag. This has been a waste of your free time, and I hope you enjoyed it. Today's gospel is be gay, do crime, kill Lewis. Thank you so much for watching this incredibly stupid video. I will see you all next time. Thank you to all of my members. Stay safe, stay wonderful, my friends, and goodbye. See you next time.